Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gretchen Harrington. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 sisters, and her family moved to the small town of Brawl shortly after her birth. Gretchen's father, a pastor, took a job at the local church, and Gretchen quickly grew to love the town. She spent much of her free time outdoors with her sisters and friends. Brawl was a safe community where parents felt comfortable letting their children play outside until dark. As a member of a devoutly religious family, Gretchen spent much time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, always getting top grades. On August 15, 1975, Gretchen's family was eagerly awaiting the return of her mother and newborn sister from the hospital. Gretchen wanted to be home to greet them, but her father encouraged her to attend Sunday school to keep up her grades. Gretchen reluctantly agreed to go to church and set off with her Bible. Her older sisters, who usually walked with her, stayed home that morning. However, Gretchen wasn't worried about the short 8-minute walk to church. Sunday school is divided into 2 sessions. The first session takes place at Trinity Church and lasts an hour and a half. After that, some of the children go to Father Gretchen's church. But when the children arrived at the second church at 11:30 a.m., Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was not there. He assumed she might be at the first church, so he called to check. The pastor's wife answered, informing him that Gretchen was not there. She then told her husband, David, who was a Sunday school teacher. He was surprised by the news, since Gretchen had not attended his class that morning. Gretchen's father became worried when he couldn't find her. He asked David to contact the police and started searching the area between the churches and nearby streets, but she was nowhere to be found. He also reached out to the parents of her friends. But they were either at church or home. Her best friend, who was also David's daughter, hadn't seen her all day. As news of Gretchen's disappearance spread, the police quickly launched a search operation. Hundreds of volunteers joined in, many of whom knew Gretchen's father from his church. Together, they searched the entire town, then moved on to wooded areas and the riverbank. A police helicopter was also deployed to scan the area from above. The search continued through the night, but to no avail. The next day, more volunteers joined in. Police posted flyers with Gretchen's photo and information about her disappearance along the roads. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find Gretchen. After several days of searching, no significant clues were found and Gretchen's fate remains a mystery. The town is known for its safe environment, where children are often allowed to play outside freely without adult supervision from a young age. However, this sense of security is no longer there when Gretchen goes missing. Some people thought she might have run away from home, while others believed she had gone swimming in the river and drowned. However, the most alarming theory was that she had been abducted by someone. As a result, parents became extremely cautious and stopped letting their children go out alone. Police interviewed bystanders. They gathered some clues. One witness reported seeing a girl who looked like Gretchen near the church on the morning she went missing. According to the witness, a green sedan approached the girl, but the witness did not see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but this time described a white Cadillac approaching the girl. Police checked the owners of cars matching the description in the area. 4 days later, detectives received a new lead. A resident of Westchester, a town 30 minutes from Brawl, contacted police and reported finding children's shorts matching the description of Gretchen's clothing. Police immediately showed Gretchen's mother the shorts. But she confirmed that they did not belong to her daughter. The investigation into Gretchen's disappearance had stalled, with no progress made for several weeks. As a result, the police halted their search operation and shifted their focus to gathering more information. They continued to interview witnesses, but with each passing day, their hopes of finding Gretchen alive began to dwindle. Until October 14th, when police received a phone call. A jogger was running in a large national park, about 20 minutes from Brawl, when he stumbled upon a body. The jogger immediately alerted park rangers, who then notified the police. Upon arriving at the scene, police quickly determined that the body was that of a child. However, due to the severe state of decomposition, identification of the child was extremely difficult. Police suspected that Gretchen might be the victim, so they showed her parents the clothes found on her body. Gretchen's mother quickly identified them as her daughters because she had sewn them herself. Forensic experts later confirmed that the body was Gretchen's by comparing them to her dental records. They also determined that she had died from severe head trauma. Because the body was so badly decomposed, police were unable to gather further information, including whether Gretchen had been sexually assaulted. Additionally, DNA analysis was not available in 1975, leaving police without any further leads. News of the murder sparked renewed interest in the case, and police received numerous tips from the community. The investigation into Gretchen's death turned up no leads. Police screened nearby residents with a history of violent crime, but nothing came up. Months later, the case had made no progress. Over the years, the case was reopened periodically, and the police reviewed the available information. However, each time, the investigation yielded no new evidence. Even applying DNA analysis was of no help in this case, as no foreign DNA was found on Gretchen's body or clothing. The case of Gretchen's murder went unsolved for decades, occasionally resurfacing in newspapers and on television. However, it wasn't until recent years that the case regained widespread public attention. Two local journalists, Joanna and Mike, decided to write a book about the crime, dedicating several years to gathering information. As children, both Joanna and Mike grew up in the same town as Gretchen. Joanna, who was only 9 years old when the crime occurred, the town had changed forever, and children were no longer allowed to roam freely. Leave home unsupervised. This fear lasted for years, leaving a lasting impression on the townspeople, the memory of Gretchen's murder still fresh in their minds. To write their book, Joanna and Mike had access to the case files and interviewed individuals involved in the investigation. By carefully piecing together the events surrounding Gretchen's disappearance, they were able to reconstruct the entire story. The book, released in 2022, brought attention to Gretchen's case. Months later, a woman contacted police about Gretchen. The woman said she was 10 years old at the time of the murder and lived in Havertone, near Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her sisters, as well as many other kids in the area. She often slept over at friends' houses, and one night, while she was at her sister's house, she woke up in the middle of the night feeling someone touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw their father standing in front of her, who quickly left. The next day, she stayed another night. Her friend's dad continued to come into her bedroom and started touching her. The next morning, she finally told one of her sisters about what happened to her. She was surprised that it happened quite often with her friends. When the woman returned home, she shared her entire story with her parents. However, instead of going to the authorities, they banned her from ever going to her friend's house again. This was just a week before Gretchen went missing. The woman eventually revealed the identity of the man involved in her story, David Zanstra, the same pastor who taught at Sunday school. She also shared that a month after Gretchen went missing, one of her friends told her about the incident, that a man had tried to kidnap her. The girl refused to get into his car and later confided to her friends that the real culprit was David Zanstra. The woman provided her personal diary as evidence of the information provided. In her diary entry on September 15, 1975, she documented her friend's request to keep the encounter secret due to fears of potential harm from David Zanstra. Upon receiving this new information, the police immediately reopened the investigation into Gretchen's disappearance. While reviewing the case files, detectives discovered several suspicious factors that indirectly implicated David Zandstra. It was David Zandstra who reported Gretchen missing to the police, providing investigators with a detailed description of her clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front buttons and pockets without zippers or buttons, and a white shirt with braided hair. However, he mentioned that he had not seen Gretchen that day, raising questions about how he knew what she was wearing. His description was later confirmed by the discovery of her body, dressed exactly as he had described. Police closely examined David, the man who taught Sunday school at Gretchen's father's church. David initially claimed he had not seen Gretchen on the morning of her disappearance. However, David's alibi gave him enough time to kidnap Gretchen, kill her, dump her body in the park, and return to the church to teach. The investigation revealed that David and his family had moved to another state just months after Gretchen went missing. This sudden move, combined with David's ownership of a green scooter, attracted the attention of the police. The police decided to question David, who was now 83 years old and living in Georgia. On July 17, 2023, they began questioning David. As the conversation progressed, David realized that the police suspected him of murder. In response, he denied all accusations and asked what evidence they had against him. David was confronted with incriminating evidence, including a woman's testimony about his inappropriate behavior at a sleepover and allegations of molesting his own daughter. When he learned that his secret had been exposed, David's demeanor changed. After 48 years of silence, he finally began to talk about the murder. According to David, on the morning of the murder, he drove his green American motor station wagon to the church where Gretchen's father was the pastor. He saw Gretchen leave the house and waited until no one was around before approaching her. He offered her a ride, and she agreed. However, instead of taking Gretchen to the church, David drove her to a secluded park area. He stopped the car and instructed her to undress, but Gretchen refused and asked to go home. In response, David struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. He then removed her clothes and committed the crime before driving her to another park. He carried her body into the bushes and concealed it with branches. David then returned to the church to begin his classes. When David confessed to the crime, the police arrested him for Gretchen's murder. David went to Pennsylvania, where he was held pending trial. David's work held a respectable position in society, which protected him from suspicion. However, after the truth finally came to light, the police obtained a DNA sample and began comparing it with DNA from other unsolved cases. They also investigated the disappearances of young girls in the cities where he worked. Police have linked David to the disappearance of 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, who went missing in 1991. The case resembles Gretchen's. At the time, David Zandstra was a pastor in that same neighborhood. The police currently have no concrete evidence against David, but they have found similarities between the various cases and Gretchen's kidnapping. Therefore, they are investigating David as the possible perpetrator of the cases. The trial for Gretchen's murder has not yet begun. David's attorney is trying to delay the process and advise him to withdraw his confession. If this happens, the trial could drag on for years, and given his advanced age, David may not live to see the verdict. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kelly Dwyer. Kelly Dwyer was born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago. Her parents divorced when she was 16, but they remained close to her. The divorce had a significant impact on Kelly's life. A year after her parents' divorce, Kelly graduated from high school without a clear plan for her future. To delay her decision to go to college, she worked part-time at a local restaurant. 6 years later, in 2008, Kelly, then 22, moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to start afresh. She enrolled in college, became a yoga instructor, and found a job as a saleswoman to cover her living expenses. She also worked as a nanny to earn extra income. Kelly often visited trendy places around town, creating memorable experiences. When she met her father a month ago, she was living in Milwaukee, and her life was going well. At that time, Kelly was a successful yoga instructor and a popular employee at a sports store. Kelly seemed content with her life, enjoying her job and a year-long relationship with Chris Zacco, a 38-year-old IT manager for a transportation company. Chris had graduated from Boston University in 2009 with a degree in international business and had moved from New York City to Milwaukee for work. He was a hardworking, decent man from a good family who shared Kelly's interests in sports and entertainment. Kelly and Chris seemed to get along well. Chris had built a successful career, owned a luxury apartment, an expensive car, and a large fortune that he had earned himself. Kelly's father approved of him, seeing him as a great match for his daughter. On October 12, 2013, Kelly was nowhere to be seen at work. She was well liked for her punctuality and work ethic, so this struck everyone as odd. Her colleagues tried to contact her, but her cell phone was silent. She was also inactive on social media. Kelly had never left her phone behind before. She simply disappeared, and her loved ones contacted the police to file a missing persons report. However, during the investigation into Kelly's disappearance, detectives found no evidence of enemies or individuals who might want to harm her. All of her belongings were still at home, so police ruled out the possibility that she left voluntarily. What was concerning was that her bank account, phone, and other accounts had no activity. Police suspected that Kelly was in trouble. Since Chris was the last person to see her on October 10, 2013, investigators brought him in for questioning. Chris stated that he and Kelly spent time at his apartment in Lafayette Towers, then went to a nearby bar, socialized, and drank. They returned to his apartment around 2:30 a.m., had a good time, and went to bed. At 9 a.m., Kelly left Chris's apartment, and they never saw each other again. Chris insisted that Kelly was not his girlfriend, saying they had an open relationship. He also revealed that he was in love with someone else and had plans for a future with her. This raised suspicions among investigators, who found Chris's story plausible but noted inconsistencies in his words and actions. To investigate further, detectives interviewed friends who had been with Kelly and Chris the night before Kelly went missing. These friends confirmed that the group had a good time at a bar and then ordered pizza, eating it on a bench outside. Kelly seemed to be in a good mood, sharing her plans for the next day, which included sleeping in, doing yoga, doing laundry, and relaxing. Chris and Kelly left for his apartment that night, where they met another friend who had been invited over for drinks. This friend reported feeling uncomfortable in Chris's apartment because she sensed tension between Chris and Kelly. She recalled that Chris was smoking and chatting with her while Kelly seemed upset. Assuming that Kelly was just tired, the friend thought little of it and left the apartment. However, after talking to Kelly's other friends, investigators discovered that Chris and Kelly were not on good terms. Kelly loves Chris very much. But unfortunately, Chris seems uninterested in their relationship. Chris does not make any long-term plans involving Kelly, which worries her. Kelly's friend, missing, suspects that Chris is being unfaithful and that their relationship will not last. As a result, Kelly loses hope for a future with Chris and begins to look for other options. She creates a profile on a dating website and starts chatting with various men, but she has yet to meet any of them in real life. Kelly's intention is to have a backup plan in case things do not work out with Chris. Additionally, her friends notice bruises on Kelly's arms and neck and ask her about them, but Kelly dismisses their concerns by downplaying the situation. Her friends suspect that the bruises may be a sign of domestic violence, but Kelly never confirms their suspicions. Meanwhile, investigators analyzed security footage from Chris's home. The footage showed Kelly and Chris coming home drunk one night, but Kelly was never seen leaving the apartment. This contradicted Chris's testimony that Kelly left his home at 9 a.m. the next morning. It was later discovered that another friend of Chris's was at the apartment that night and admitted to using illegal drugs with Chris. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Chris's apartment and found numerous drugs, pills, pipes, and other paraphernalia, leading to Chris's arrest for possession. They also discovered a torn shower curtain that appeared to have been forcefully removed. During questioning, Chris remained calm and admitted to using drugs but denied distributing them. A search of his cell phone revealed disturbing content, including photos of an unconscious girl in bed and a video of Chris raping the girl, who appeared to have been strangled. This led to suspicions that Chris had drugged and exploited her. Evidence from Chris's phone was linked to Kelly's disappearance. Police returned to Chris's apartment with a dog, which responded to the bed and bathroom area before leading them to the front door. The dog then guided police to Chris's car in the parking lot and to a nearby dumpster. The investigation reached a critical stage when investigators believed Kelly had been murdered. Kelly's boyfriend, Chris, became the prime suspect, as evidence suggested he was the last person to see her alive. It is believed that he spent time with Kelly in his apartment before secretly moving her body into his car, a plan that would have escaped the building's 28 surveillance cameras. During the investigation, police analyzed Chris's computer and discovered child pornography. This led to Chris being charged with possession of the images, but he was released on bail and is awaiting trial. The investigation continues as authorities attempt to find Kelly's body and gather enough evidence to build a stronger case against Chris. It should be noted that Chris had claimed to be in a long-term relationship with a woman, and investigators quickly began gathering information about that woman. The investigation uncovered the identity of a woman named Megan, with whom Chris had been secretly in a 3-year relationship, unbeknownst to Kelly, similar to the relationship he had with Kelly. Police came to interview Megan and showed her photos of Chris' apartment. After a thorough inspection, Megan found several items missing, including a shower curtain in the bathroom, a rug, several towels, and the large golf bag that was usually kept in the bedroom. Detectives believe Kelly could fit in the large bag Megan reported missing. After examining the building's entrances and exits, police found a side path that Chris could have taken to get to his car without being seen by surveillance cameras. Reviewing footage from the parking lot cameras, Chris was seen arriving at the house with the large bag, which he placed in the trunk of his car. At 10:06 a.m. on October 11th, Chris left the house in his car. Just 2 minutes later, at 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone lost connection at the same location. Over the next 8 hours, footage captured Chris making multiple trips between his home and his car, loading up on belongings, before leaving for good at 6:16 p.m. Chris did not return home until the next day. When investigators asked him what he had been doing the previous day, he said he was moving his summer sports gear to his mother's house. However, no one found this explanation credible. Chris was supposed to meet Megan at 7:30 that evening, but he arrived more than an hour late. Detectives suspected that he was looking for a place to dispose of Kelly's body, which would explain his delay. Unfortunately, they were unable to track his movements because his phone had been turned off since the morning. As an IT expert, Chris would have known that his phone records could be used to track him. Megan reported that Chris seemed very strange that night. He appeared restless and anxious, and he said that his phone was not working, which was why he was late. After the date, Megan and Chris went to Megan's apartment, where they spent the night. According to Megan, Chris was extremely stressed, had not slept at all, and was sweating so much that she had to change the sheets in the morning. Investigators believe that Chris was worried because he still had Kelly's body in the trunk of his car and was afraid of being discovered. He was trying to find a place to hide her body. On the morning of October 12th, Chris said goodbye to Megan and left after trying to convince her to temporarily move to Denver, but she refused. Police tracked Chris's location history using his car's GPS, which led them to a cheese shop called Cheese House, 80 miles from Milwaukee. However, it seemed unlikely that Chris would have driven that far just to buy cheese. Chris claimed that he had bought cheese for his parents, presenting a receipt for the cheese at 9:55 a.m. on October 12th, which his parents confirmed. However, the police found it difficult to believe Chris's story, as the same cheese could easily be purchased at a nearby supermarket. They suspected that Chris might have dumped Kelly's body in the area around the cheese store. Further investigation revealed that on his way back, Chris stopped at a sports store and bought new sneakers that afternoon. Detectives suspected that Chris had deliberately discarded his old shoes, possibly to avoid leaving blood or footprints that could be linked to the crime scene. It appeared that he had carefully planned to destroy evidence and create an alibi for himself. Chris, with his analytical mind, had tried to commit the perfect crime. However, investigators were able to spot inconsistencies in his story. Notably, it took him over 2 hours to travel from the cheese house to the sports store, a distance of about 80 kilometers, when it would normally take only an hour. This significant time difference suggests that Chris spent an additional hour on another activity, possibly hiding the body. Police speculate that he may have dumped the body along the way. However, the exact location of the body remains unknown. With a large search area spanning 50 miles, finding the body proved to be a huge challenge. A roadside search eventually led to a discovery. In a wooded area approximately 37 miles from the city, a local resident found human remains while walking. Upon discovery, the resident immediately contacted the sheriff's office. Dental records confirmed the remains were those of Kelly Dwyer. This discovery finally ended Kelly's parents' long and agonizing search for their daughter. The next step was to secure justice by determining the exact cause of her death. Based on available information, the medical examiner believed she may have been strangled but not forcefully enough to fracture the hyoid bone. There was no direct evidence at the scene where Kelly's body was discovered, such as torn curtains, mats, towels, or bags. However, the position of the skeleton provided valuable insight. The body was found face down, with one arm trapped underneath and the legs bent in a way that suggested it had been hidden for some time after death. This finding further supported the theory that Kelly's body had been hidden in a golf bag. As evidenced by footage of Chris holding the bag and driving into the area where the body was discovered. While these findings were compelling, they were circumstantial and did not directly implicate Chris in Kelly's murder. Ultimately, it took 5 years for Chris to be formally charged in connection with Kelly's disappearance. The charges against him were manslaughter and concealment of a body, as investigators lacked specific evidence to prove intent. Theorizing about the events of that night, detectives speculated that Chris and Kelly had become intimate, but Chris got carried away with strangulation, leading to Kelly's death. The investigation revealed that Chris then ripped off the shower curtain, removed the rug and towels, wrapped Kelly's body, placed it in a bag, thoroughly cleaned the house, and disposed of it. Throughout the ordeal, Chris maintained his innocence in Kelly's murder. Key evidence was presented at Chris's trial, including CCTV footage, cell phone video of the strangulation, and the search of his apartment by a dog. Megan, who testified against Chris, reported that he was extremely anxious on the day of the incident and was late for a meeting. Additionally, Chris's former girlfriends took the stand, expressing their concerns about his unhealthy obsession with strangulation and rough sex, which had frightened them. The defense countered that there was no direct evidence linking Chris to the crime and that the prosecution's case was based on speculation and conjecture. Chris had a clean record before the drug possession incident and was a successful IT professional with a stable job. The defense argued that Chris was incapable of murder. However, it was discovered that not all the CCTV footage had been saved, casting doubt on the prosecution's conclusion that Kelly had not left Chris's house. The defense presented a witness who claimed to have seen a girl resembling Kelly in another man's car the weekend after she went missing. Although the witness had previously seen Kelly on TV as a missing person, he was not 100% sure it was her. The defense offered an alternative explanation for Kelly's disappearance, suggesting that she may have left Chris's apartment safely but was later caught by one of her new boyfriends. The defense also questioned the reliability of the police dog during the investigation. Since the dog's reaction was not captured on video, its alert was based solely on the police officer's subjective interpretation. In response, the prosecution argued that the investigation using the sniffer dog was conducted objectively and transparently, with multiple police officers present and agreeing on the results. Ultimately, the prosecution convinced the jury that Chris was responsible for the murder. With no other obvious suspects, the prosecution argued that Chris had planned and executed the crime carefully, deliberately destroying evidence to cover his tracks. After lengthy deliberations, the jury found Chris guilty of first-degree manslaughter and concealing a body. The Kelly family and the prosecution had asked for the maximum sentence of 48 years, while the defense asked for a reduced sentence of 22 years. In December 2018, Chris Sacco, then 43, was sentenced to 31 years in prison, including 26 years for manslaughter and 5 years for concealing a body. In addition, Chris Sacco was sentenced to 19 years for possession of child pornography and possession of narcotics, based on the outcome of his November 2014 trial. Chris Sacco is currently serving his sentence at the Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin. He will be eligible for parole in 2065, when he turns 93, essentially making his sentence a life sentence. Chris Sacco was unhappy with the sentence and attempted to appeal, but his appeal was rejected. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Madison Sparrow. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige. She has two older sisters, Molly and Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, is from Richard's previous relationship. The family eventually settled in Newark, Delaware. Madison's younger sister, Molly, was born on October 5, 2010, and the two sisters became close. As the oldest, Madison has a natural talent for taking care of children and takes her role seriously. She enjoys spending time with her cousins, often performing comedic acts and making people laugh. Her bubbly spirit and cheerful demeanor make her a joy to be around. However, her father says she also has a more introverted side, often becoming pensive and lost in thought. From a young age, Madison demonstrated wisdom beyond her years, carefully observing situations before reacting. Friends and family appreciated Madison's loyalty and caring nature, often seeking comfort in her warm embrace. Madison had a passion for learning and exploring new experiences. This curiosity led her to join the Girl Scouts, a global organization empowering girls to develop life skills. When Madison joined the Girl Scouts at age 9, she took on the role of troop leader. Over nearly 10 years with the Girl Scouts, Madison earned numerous badges for her outstanding achievements and built lasting friendships. As she grew older, Madison's connection to the principles of Girl Scouting deepened. She volunteered to help her sister Molly's troop and remains dedicated to helping others and upholding the values of the organization. Madison frequently parties with her friends, engaging in activities like movie nights, makeup, manicures, and pedicures. Although she stays up late, she often sleeps in until 2 p.m. the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison befriended Anuka Stalinsky, a classmate born on July 9, 2003, in Newark. Madison and Anuka quickly became close friends. As they moved on to middle school, they expanded their circle and met Noah Sharp, a Newark native born on August 23, 2001. Noah, Madison, and Anuka often spent time together, enjoying activities like eating ice cream or going for walks around town. Noah and Madison gradually developed feelings for each other, leading to a romantic relationship. Their teenage romance blossomed quickly, and they fell deeply in love. However, their relationship took an unexpected turn in early 2020, about a year after they started dating. Madison decided to end the relationship, leaving Noah confused, as she did not give any clear reason for the breakup. After their amicable breakup, Noah remains heartbroken but finds emotional comfort in Anuka, who becomes a trusted companion. Noah and Anuka begin spending more time together and text each other daily. Despite still being sad, Noah starts dating Anuka. However, he maintains a relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Madison, and even visits her on her 17th birthday with a gift. During the visit, Madison's mother notices Noah's lingering emotional pain. Meanwhile, Anuka discovers Noah's encounter with Madison and becomes jealous. Noah's lingering resentment towards Madison turns into anger, and he wants to hurt her for not sharing his pain. Overcome with jealousy and hatred, Anuka and Noah devise a plan to harm Madison. They exchange ideas about methods and discuss ways to destroy evidence through text messages, video calls, and in-person conversations. Their conversations reveal a disturbing intent to cause Madison suffering. Anuka and Noah consider several methods, including stabbing Madison in the heart with a knife. They also consider using a handgun or blunt object to inflict fatal injuries. However, they decide against using a handgun because of the loud noise it would make. Although Noah is unsure, they ultimately decide to use a blunt object. During their discussions, they calculate the number of bricks they would need to weigh down Madison's body if they decided to dump her in a body of water. When they have doubts about this plan, they also consider burying Madison. Since Noah is used to digging and knows where to find a shovel, this seems like a viable option. They eventually come up with a plan that they think can't fail. Madison loves Halloween and ice cream. She eagerly looks forward to celebrating her favorite holiday every year. Anuka knows Madison loves Halloween and ice cream and uses this to her advantage. On Friday, October 2, 2020, Anuka calls Madison and invites her to spend the day together, using the excuse of going to buy ice cream to lure Madison into their trap. Madison quickly agrees to meet, as she has not talked to her friend for a long time. She also wants to buy a birthday present for Molly, whose birthday is in 3 days. On the day of the meeting, Madison wears black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, and a blue sweatshirt that says, New Jersey. She adds a unique touch to her outfit with a pair of white ghost earrings that she has just bought for Halloween. At 2:44 p.m., Madison says goodbye to her family and leaves. They have no idea that this will be the last time they see their daughter alive. Later that day, the Madisons begin receiving abusive text messages from Madison's phone number, along with messages saying that Madison is leaving the country. Believing it to be a prank, her father, Heather, responds with well wishes and jokes that Madison has forgotten her passport, which is in a safe. However, when Heather calls Madison, there is no answer. Heather begins to worry when she does not receive a response. Since she and Anuka have plans to meet later, Heather decides to call Anuka. As soon as Anuka picks up the phone, she bursts into tears. Anuka explains to Heather that Madison had an abusive conversation with her, then Madison got out of the car near a store. Heather suggested that Anuka call Noah, but he did not answer. Frustrated, Heather asked Anuka to try contacting him again. Eventually, the three of them talked, but they did not get any information. so Heather decided to return home. On the way home, Heather received several messages from Madison's friends. These friends also received strange messages and wanted to know what was going on. When she got home, Heather searched for any clues but found no sign that Madison had left voluntarily. Madison's birthday money, clothes, and credit cards were still in her room. Furthermore, the messages were meaningless, as Madison had no reason to run away, especially without clothes and money. When Madison had not returned home by 8:30 p.m., Heather called 911 to report that her daughter was missing. Despite her repeated attempts to contact people, all her efforts were unsuccessful. Heather notified her parents, who were in another city, of the emergency, and they came to her aid. Heather also notified Madison's father, who lives in Colorado, of Madison's disappearance. He quickly shared the information on social media to call for help in finding his daughter. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, authorities issued a yellow alert after Madison, a 17-year-old, went missing. In Delaware, this type of alert is activated when a person under the age of 18 goes missing and triggers the necessary search measures to find Madison. After receiving the report, police search teams, along with Madison's family and friends, began searching for Madison on farms near the University of Delaware, where she was last seen. They also worked with the media to inform the public about the incident and asked people to come forward with information. At the same time, the authorities also began questioning Madison's friends to gather information. Many sources indicated that Madison's ex-boyfriend, Noah, might be involved in the case. Some information showed that he was with Madison in the woods in Newark before she went missing. After investigating, the police arrested Noah and questioned him for 9 hours on October 4th and 5th. During the interrogation, Noah gave different statements but insisted that he did not know what happened to Madison. Finally, the silence was broken, and everyone was shocked, and the young man confessed to his horrific act. He claimed that he had killed the girl and that Anuka was an accomplice. When reporting to the police, Noah said that Anuka was jealous of Madison's relationship with him. He shared that he was deeply hurt after breaking up with Madison and that it made him lose control. According to Noah, Anuka took Madison to the woods behind the elementary school. Noah hid behind a bush and attacked Madison with an aluminum baseball bat. Madison was not expecting this and was happy to spend time with her friend. Noah said he hit Madison twice in the head, and the second hit caused him to lose control and use a lot of force. He then continued to strike her body several more times. After the attack, Noah and Anuka moved Madison's body in Anuka's car to a location under a bridge near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, about 15 minutes from the crime scene and near a warehouse. Upon arriving at the scene, Noah and Anuka attempted to push the body into the river but were unsuccessful. Instead, they chose to hide the body in a shallow grave. With detailed information from Noah, investigators thoroughly searched the designated area. There, they found the aluminum baseball bat, the weapon used, with traces of blood. Investigators also found the clothes Madison was wearing when she left the house, along with several burned items. Noah then led police to a large wooded area near the intersection of I-95 and Delaware State Road, where Noah and Anuka hid Madison's body. On Monday, October 5, 2020, the police announced the discovery of Madison's body. The revelation shocked Madison's family, friends, and the entire community. Days later, on Friday, October 9th, hundreds gathered at the high school football field to remember and honor Madison. An autopsy revealed that Madison died from blunt force trauma to the head. Additionally, experts found DNA from Noah and Anuka in the physical evidence collected at the crime scene and where the body was discovered. Noah faces charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime, and first-degree conspiracy. He has been committed to a correctional facility with bail set at $1 million. On Monday, November 16, 2020, more than a month after Madison's murder and following the processing of necessary evidence, 17-year-old Anuka was also arrested. She was taken into custody after a Newcastle County grand jury indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family remains in a state of grief. Heather has repeatedly stated that a plausible reason for her daughter's death will never be found. Heather believes that dangerous killers should be locked up for life after double murder. Although Noah admitted to detectives that he committed the crime, he denied it in his formal court indictment. Noah's defense argued that Noah was mentally unstable. Attorneys often attempt to justify their clients by citing mental instability. And this case is no exception. During one of the preliminary hearings, Noah's attorney stated that Noah was being treated for schizophrenia and was under the care of a psychiatrist at the time of the murder. The attorney also asserted that Noah had suffered an injury in Chester County, Pennsylvania, approximately 3 weeks prior to the murder, which caused him memory loss and other issues. However, in May 2021, Anuka pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her attorneys reached a deal with prosecutors in which Anuka agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intention to end Madison's life. According to court documents, several individuals, including those close to Madison, informed the police about Noah's second personality, known as alter ego. However, prosecutors argued that Noah himself disseminated this information as part of a plan to justify his actions by proving he was mentally ill. He spread the rumors in advance, intending to use this information in court later. After 2 long years of waiting for justice, on October 20, 2022, the trial of the defendant began in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called, most by Deputy Attorney General Matt Foley. The Newcastle County courtroom played hours of video footage of Noah's interrogation by state police detectives. Viewers heard Noah's constantly changing accounts until he finally confessed. The defense attempted to challenge this evidence, insisting that the police had questioned their client for too long and had influenced Noah's testimony. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that the detectives manipulated the interrogation by telling Noah what to say and pressuring him. However, it was clear to everyone that these were just desperate attempts to justify the murder in any way possible. The prosecution presented text messages between Noah and Anuka that showed they were planning the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense tried to convince the court that someone else had used Noah's device and that he was not the one communicating with Anuka. Noah's mother and brother were called to testify, but their testimonies were inconsistent. Noah's mother, Nakia, claimed that her son was not wet when he came home on the evening of October 2nd. In contrast, his brother David said that Noah was soaked and looked like he had been in a swamp. Nakia later said that when Noah came home, Anuka came in calmly, but David described Anuka as angrily slamming the door. Prosecutor Matt Foley asked Nakia if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him, and she said no. However, the prosecutor played a recording of a phone call between Noah and his mother from a month before the trial. During the conversation, they discussed surveillance camera evidence from the elementary school. Noah told his mother that his face was not shown in the video, although he and Anuka had been near the school about an hour before Madison was killed. She reacted with relief when the video was released, showing an African-American man of Noah's height and build, holding a baseball bat and walking into the woods with a girl. The defense also questioned the defendant's relatives about the head injury he allegedly suffered on September 13, 2020, and an unconfirmed fall from a bicycle accident hours before he was questioned by police on October 4. Noah's attorney argued that these injuries could have caused dissociative amnesia in order to justify the statements he made to police. In response, the prosecutor questioned whether the injuries were part of a plot to kill Madison, something the defense contested with some uncertainty. Anuka affirmed all of the prosecution's arguments during the 3-hour trial. During her testimony, she calmly explained that Noah had convinced her that Madison had talked behind her back, although Madison's friends and family were adamant that Madison had never done so. After 8 days of trial and more than 250 pieces of evidence presented by the prosecutor, the jury took just 3 hours to reach a verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the jury's verdict was announced, Noah and his mother showed no emotion. Noah simply turned to smile at his mother. Madison's family cried tears of relief before leaving the courtroom. Heather, Madison's mother, echoed her daughter's words, "Choose the light, not the dark. Love conquers all." She also expressed gratitude to her friends and family. "This has been a 2-year process, and we couldn't have done it without their continued love and support. We also want to thank everyone, especially Newark Charter School, the Board of Trustees, and families who have supported the Love Wins 5K over the past 2 years, as well as the Madison Sparrow Memorial Scholarship to support future educators." Regarding Anuka, when Noah was found guilty, prosecutors said that under Delaware law, she faced life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years because she was a minor at the time of the crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Keely Bunker. What happens when a trusted friend who is meant to keep you safe turns out to be the very monster you should flee from? In the case of Keely, she discovered the dark and unsettling truth behind her friend's seemingly innocent smiles. But unfortunately, it was too late. This is the heart-wrenching story of Keely Bunker. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Keely, who will forever cherish her memory. Before the 19th of September 2019, Keely was full of life. Born on the 7th of September 1999, Keely was both a blessing to her parents and a role model to her siblings. Her mother described her as a precious and beautiful daughter, while her sister described her as one of the most vibrant, caring, and beautiful souls this earth has ever seen. She was a go-getter who had worked her way through the hurdles of life to get a degree and become a teacher. On the day she met her tragic fate, she was to go in for an interview to become an assistant teacher. But that promising life was cut short by her childhood friend, Wesley Street. Wesley and Keely had known each other since they were in infant school. Although they might not have been best of friends, they were quite close because they maintained their friendship through the years. It was for this reason Keely invited him to her 20th birthday celebration after the musician H's concert at the O2 on the 18th of September 2019. Keely was very excited about that day. On the day of the concert, Keely and her best friend, Monique Riggin, met Wesley at the New Street station in Birmingham. After the concert, the trio went to a nightclub where they partied till 2:40 a.m. Then they got a taxi back to Tamworth, where they stayed. Keely's house was a walking distance from where they alighted, and Monique had asked her to stay the night due to concerns about her safety. But Keely didn't want to miss the job interview she had fixed the next day, and said, "I've got Wes, he'll walk me back, it'll be fine." That was the last time Monique saw her. The next day, Keely didn't get to the interview, and friends and family tried to contact her. By 5:30 p.m. that day, her father filed a missing persons report. After reaching out to friends, the police discovered Wesley was the last person to see her, and he was immediately brought in for questioning. The 20-year-old man claimed to have parted ways with Keely when they reached a telephone box close to his home, leaving her to walk the rest of the path alone. As part of the investigation, the police officers told him to take them to the exact location, and he pointed it out. He even showed the officers the exact route they had walked to that very spot, and they couldn't be more grateful for his help, so they let him go. But at 9 p.m., her uncle, Jason Brown, who was part of the search party, discovered Keely's body submerged in a pond in Wigington Park in Tamworth. Her clothes had been taken off, and there were marks on her neck, indicating that she had been strangled to death. It was a horrifying sight. Wesley immediately became the first suspect. The police arrested Wesley, and the interrogation began. He stuck on the fact that he had left Keely alive at the telephone box. But when they went through his mobile phone, his GPS showed that he went to the location of the murder 7 times that day. And when he tried to argue his innocence, the CCTV footage showed him and Keely by Tamworth Rugby Club, later than the time he claimed to have left her. His bank card and jacket were found in the park, and the post-mortem examination of Keely revealed Street's DNA. With this evidence, he was charged with the sexual assault and murder of Keely. Initially, during the trial, Wesley kept arguing his innocence. He mentioned that he was so drunk, he messed up the description of how the night went. He promised that he had left her happy, and she seemed happy. However, later into the trial, he claimed to have accidentally killed her during consensual sex in the park. He said Keely had flirted and teased him as they walked home, and in the end, they had found themselves in the park. But you should note that before that confession, he claimed that they were childhood friends who had never entertained any ideas of romance, so it was clear that he kept changing his statements to go in line with the evidence that was being presented. Wesley went on to describe how his GPS location showed him returning to the murder spot several times that day. He said that after accidentally murdering her during a moment of passion, he dumped the body in the pond and kept returning to the location to cover Keely with branches. When he was asked why he didn't tell the truth, when he was asked by the police and Keely's relatives before the body was discovered, he said, "I didn't know how to act and explain to other people how she died, because I felt embarrassed in myself and very scared to explain to the police, everyone, my mom and dad." However, the evidence presented by the prosecution showed otherwise. On their walk home, Wesley had persuaded Keely to go towards the rugby club close to the park on the pretext of going for a smoke. On getting to the park, he had forced himself on her and held her in a chokehold while she was fighting for freedom. His claims that he killed her in a moment of passion couldn't have been possible because it would take more than a few seconds for her to die. Then, when she died, he took her to the pond, covered her up with branches, and went home. The evidence presented before the jurors was already enough to find him guilty. But before the sentencing date, more chilling evidence about Wesley's horrible nature came to light. Due to the severity of the case, media outlets were quick to post details about the trial. This unknowingly triggered a reaction from women who had been previous victims of Wesley. In the court, Wesley portrayed himself as a young man who had made innocent mistakes. His father also testified that he was autistic and needed help understanding the proceedings of the trial. However, 3 women who had been victims of his sexual assault came forward to completely refute any claim of his innocence. In the year 2015, he sexually assaulted a 16-year-old girl. In 2017, his victim was a 15-year-old girl. And just a few months before Keely's death, his victim was another 20-year-old. Although investigations show there was a possibility there were more victims, those 3 were the only ones courageous enough to step forward. One of them told the court that she thought she was never going to get over it, but she had fought the sickening thoughts that almost overwhelmed her. Another said she was really scared to tell anyone because of how ashamed she felt, but after hearing about Keely's case, she just couldn't remain quiet. The third survivor shared how she blamed herself for the incident because she had gone to his house. Hannah Sway, the lead prosecutor, described Wesley's offense as a pattern of offending. She described Wesley as a man who tried to get what he wanted without having any regard for the consequences. She also mentioned that his innocent look and friendly character made his victims less wary of him. Reports show that his victims were either friends or acquaintances. It's easy to have a stereotypical image of a perpetrator, but what we often do not think about is a young lad who is popular, who has many friends, who is well known and liked, said Detective Inspector Cheryl Hannon, the senior investigating officer on the case. She also described Wesley as a devious and manipulating character, noting his arrogance in playing the martyr. He acted as if people were blaming him unfairly when he knew full well where she was and what he'd done, and the efforts he'd gone to concealing it to delay people finding her. His friend trusted him to walk her home that night, and it's only Wesley to blame that she didn't make it home. He was trusted to walk her home, but he manipulated the situation, preyed upon her, and ultimately raped and murdered her. He then went on to put himself at the center of the investigation, lying to the police, her family, and her friends that she was safe and well, changing his lies as the evidence was presented to him. Wesley was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole. During the sentencing, the judge described how Wesley had cut the beautiful life of Keely short, just to satisfy his desires. She lost the opportunity of fulfilling her life ambition of helping to educate young children, and her family had lost the company of their beloved daughter, sister, and niece. Keely's relatives also shared how they would never completely heal enough to forgive Wesley. Her mother, Debbie, said that as Keely's family, the outcome of this trial will never be enough in terms of justice. Keely was the kindest, most caring, and innocent young lady, and she was only just starting out in her life. Such is the hell they feel, they are incapable of showing any forgiveness. The horrible fate of Keely is a reminder that we can never truly tell who a person is. Everyone should always take precautions when they're out so late, because a person who you might deem your protector might actually be the predator. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sherry Papini. Keith and Sherry Papini first met in middle school, when Keith was in 7th grade and Sherry was in 8th. They shared their first kiss with each other. Their friendship flourished quickly, and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, as they grew older, they drifted apart and went their separate ways. Years later, Sherry married another man in 2006, but the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. After her divorce, Sherry found herself single again. Then, by chance, she ran into Keith, and the spark between them was immediately rekindled. The time they had spent apart had given them both personal growth and maturity, and they realized how much they had missed each other. Keith and Sherry decided to give their love a second chance, and they started dating. As they spent more time together, their connection grew stronger every day. Within a year of reuniting, they knew they were meant to be together. They got married in 2009 and had 2 children, settling down in Redding, California. Sherry used to work in telecommunications, but after having children, she became a stay-at-home mom. Keith continued to work at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. The Papini family seemed to have a perfect life from the outside. However, on November 2nd, 2016, Keith's world was turned upside down when he came home to find his wife, Sherry, missing. It was unusual for her not to be there, as she was always home when he returned from work. At first, Keith thought she might have gone for a walk, but as time passed and she didn't come back, he grew increasingly worried. Keith called the daycare center their children attended to see if Sherry had picked them up, but the school secretary told him she hadn't. This heightened Keith's concern, and he decided to use the Find My iPhone app on his phone to track her location. The app showed that her phone was at the end of their driveway. Alarmed, Keith rushed outside to search the area and found Sherry's phone lying on the ground, with her headphones nearby. When Keith found Sherry's phone and headphones at the end of the driveway, he made a disturbing discovery. There was strands of hair entangled in the headphones. He immediately contacted the authorities at the Shasta County Sheriff's Office, who took Sherry's disappearance seriously and brought in the FBI right from the start. Keith was desperate to find Sherry and get her back safely. To do this, he knew it was crucial to get her name and face out to the public. So he spoke to the media, hoping to generate support and assistance in finding her. The media played a huge role in spreading the story of Sherry's disappearance, and her beauty, blonde hair, and blue eyes made her case especially captivating to the public. As a result, news channels eagerly covered every detail of the story. After Sherry went missing and it became public, the police received many tips, but none of them led to finding her. As they continued to investigate, they looked at Sherry's phone for clues. They found a heated text conversation between Sherry and her husband Keith from a few months earlier, which made the police suspicious of Keith's possible involvement. Despite this, Keith was cooperative and offered to take a lie detector test to clear his name. He passed the test. In addition to the argument with Keith, the police found texts on Sherry's phone from men using fake female names. It seemed like Sherry was planning to leave Keith. On November 10, 2016, the police tracked down one of these men and questioned him about Sherry's disappearance. The man claimed to have met Sherry 5 years prior at a restaurant during a work conference she was attending. Although he said he didn't know her current whereabouts, he shared some information about her relationship with her husband Keith. According to the man, Sherry did not respect Keith and was even fearful of him. He alleged that Keith was violent and abusive, often locking Sherry up in their home. After a tip from a man who knew Sherry, claiming that her husband Keith was abusive, the police launched an investigation. However, after speaking with friends and neighbors, they found no evidence to support the claims of Keith's violence. Several days into Sherry's disappearance, on November 24, 2016, the police received a call at 4:32 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. The caller reported a woman in distress on the side of I-5. The police rushed to the scene and found a woman bound with chains and zip ties. It took a moment for the officers to realize Sherry Papini, who had been missing for days. Relieved to find her alive, they carefully freed her from the restraints and took her to the hospital for medical attention. When Sherry arrived at the hospital, it was clear that she had been through a traumatic experience. Her body was covered in bruises, her hair was noticeably shorter, and she had a burn mark on her arm, as well as a bad rash. She had also lost a significant amount of weight, weighing in at only 87 pounds. While Sherry was recovering at Woodland Memorial Hospital, the police tried to interview her, but she was too emotional to provide any information. The only condition under which she would cooperate was if her husband Keith was present in the room. With Keith by her side, Sherry recounted the terrifying incident. She said she was out jogging when a dark-colored SUV, driven by two women, approached her. She got out of the vehicle, pointed a gun at her, while Sherry Papini stayed in the car. Sherry was forced into the back of the SUV against her will. Before getting into the vehicle, Sherry had the presence of mind to leave behind her phone and headphones on the driveway, along with some strands of her hair. She did this intentionally, hoping that Keith would find them and realize something was wrong. Sherry shared the details of her abduction with the police and her husband Keith. During the journey, she kept dozing off in the back of the SUV, making it difficult for her to keep track of time. The two women had wrapped something around her face, preventing her from seeing her surroundings. They told her that she was being kidnapped because a man wanted to buy her and she was being taken to meet him. However, they refused to reveal the man's identity or location. Sherry was terrified and worried about her fate, unsure of where she was being taken or what would happen to her during her captivity. She also claimed to have been physically abused by one of the women, who frequently hit her, leaving her with multiple injuries. Sherry claimed that her captors branded her right shoulder with the word Exodus to attract a buyer, who was allegedly a police officer. She also said that her captors constantly played mariachi music, which she found disorienting and unsettling. This music added to the oppressive atmosphere of her captivity, making her feel more isolated. Sherry was held in a single room with a boarded-up window. She was chained in a closet that served as a bathroom with a bucket for sanitation purposes. About 3 weeks into her captivity, Sherry heard a gunshot. After that, she had been with her disappeared, leaving Sherry to wonder if she had been killed. Sherry Papini, who had been quiet until now, took control of the situation. She instructed Sherry to get into a car, and they drove along I-5. Without warning, the car stopped, leaving Sherry startled and disoriented. She looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The younger woman then told Sherry to get out of the car. Confused and unsure, Sherry cautiously did as she was told. As Sherry exited the car, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. Was this her chance to escape? Or was she being led into an even more dangerous situation? She was left with more questions than answers, feeling uncertain and scared. After being found safe on the side of I-5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce Sherry's return. During the conference, the police reported that Sherry had been abducted by 2 Hispanic women, which sparked widespread concern among the public. However, this news brought unintended consequences. Following the press conference, a wave of racism erupted, targeting individuals of Spanish descent. The reporting of Sherry's abduction had fueled public fear and anxiety, leading some to unfairly blame individuals associated with the Hispanic community. After being abducted, Sherry returned home and began attending therapy sessions to cope with her trauma. As a California resident, she was eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses public funds to help pay for victims' therapy. In the aftermath, she became withdrawn, spending more time at home and avoiding social outings. 1 year into the investigation, police released a composite sketch of 2 Hispanic women believed to be involved in the crime. Despite this development, no new leads emerged. The police also revealed that they had found male DNA on Sherry's underwear, which did not match her husband Keith's DNA. 2 years passed with no matches on the male DNA, and the case remained unsolved. However, in 2020, a long-awaited breakthrough finally occurred. The police working on Sherry's case decided to try a new approach to find the owner of the unknown DNA. They used a technique called familial DNA, which compares the DNA profile to potential relatives of the donor. This method is commonly used in criminal investigations to analyze DNA evidence and identify possible family members of a suspect. By looking at specific genetic traits shared among family members, investigators can create a shorter list of potential suspects and explore possible family connections. In the Sherry Papini case, the police were surprised to discover that the DNA found in her underwear matched a close relative of James Ray's, her ex-boyfriend. This new information raised many questions and became a crucial moment in the investigation. The police suspected Sherry's ex-boyfriend, James Ray's, of being involved in her abduction. To investigate, they collected a soda bottle from his trash in June 2020 and sent it to a forensic lab for DNA testing. A month later, the lab results showed a match between James's DNA and the DNA found on Sherry's underwear the day she was discovered. With this new evidence, the police went to James's home in Costa Mesa, California, where he worked at a sports shop, to ask him about Sherry's case. James told the police that he had dated Sherry about 10 years prior, and the last time he saw her was a year after they broke up. He claimed to have only heard about her disappearance and safe return through rumors. During the police interview, James initially denied any involvement in Sherry's kidnapping. However, as the conversation progressed, he revealed that he was still close friends with Sherry despite their breakup 10 years prior. Although James admitted to playing a role in her disappearance, he claimed he didn't kidnap her. Instead, he insisted he was merely assisting a friend in need. James reported to the police that Sherry reached out to him for help, claiming she needed to escape her abusive husband, Keith. On November 2, 2016, James told police that a friend had lent him a car, which he used the next day to pick up Sherry. According to James, Sherry hid in the back seat of the car, lying down during the drive to Costa Mesa. During her stay at James's house, Sherry mostly stayed in her room, only coming out to help with chores like cleaning and cooking. She even boarded up the bedroom window, as she wanted to feel secure with the door closed. James noticed that Sherry was intentionally trying to lose weight by barely eating. Sherry asked James to help her harm herself, including hitting herself to create bruises. James was uncomfortable with this request, but he still agreed to help her, even going so far as to shoot a hockey puck off her knee at her request. Despite his reservations, James participated in these harmful activities with Sherry. James confessed to branding Sherry with the word Exodus on her right shoulder using a wood-burning tool they had bought from Hobby Lobby. Before Sherry left his house, she asked James to get chains and zip ties, which he used to bind her securely before driving her to Redding, California. During the drive, Sherry told James to stop the car, which he did, and she escaped. When questioned by the police, James denied knowing anything about the two Hispanic women Sherry claimed had abducted her. However, when the police searched James's house, they were shocked to find that several rooms matched the descriptions Sherry had given of the place where she was held captive. Specifically, James' bedroom and closet exactly matched a drawing Sherry had made for the police, detailing the layout of the rooms she had been confined to. The police discovered a striking similarity between a table at James's house and the one Sherry described in her initial interviews. They decided to bring Sherry and Keith in for another interview at the police station. The police had accumulated substantial evidence that led them to believe Sherry had faked her own abduction. They intended to confront her with their findings during the interview. Before revealing the truth, they asked Sherry if she wanted Keith to leave the room. Sherry remained silent. The police then decided to leave the couple alone for a few minutes. During this time, Sherry approached Keith and confessed that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who had supposedly abducted her. She felt indebted to this woman for sparing her life. Sherry refused to press charges against the woman who attacked her. Keith listened to her reasons, but he was skeptical and worried. Sherry's explanation didn't make sense to him, and he was starting to get scared. He pointed out that even if Sherry didn't want to press charges, the attacker would still face consequences for her actions. The police re-entered the interview room with an update. They had found a familial DNA match for the male DNA on Sherry's clothing, and it led them to James Reyes, Sherry's ex-boyfriend. When Keith heard the name, he had a visceral reaction. He knew James as Sherry's ex. The police told Sherry and Keith that James Reyes, Sherry's ex-boyfriend, had passed a lie detector test. They suspected that Sherry had faked her own kidnapping and claimed to have evidence to support James's version of events. The police told Sherry that they believed her significant weight loss during her disappearance was intentional, as she had chosen to eat very little. They also suggested that the rash on her arm was caused by the cleaning products she had used at James's house. Furthermore, the police alleged that James had used a wooden tool bought from Hobby Lobby to brand Sherry. They also claimed that Sherry's broken nose was self-inflicted, caused by hitting herself with a hockey stick. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Sherry remained calm and pretended not to understand what the police were talking about. Sherry Papini claimed to have not seen her ex-boyfriend James in years, stating she last saw him at his brother's funeral in Southern California. However, the police knew she was lying because James had provided them with information about her disappearance that only someone close to her would know. On March 3, 2022, the FBI arrested Sherry on charges of lying to federal agents and faking her own abduction. 6 weeks later, she agreed to a plea deal, admitting to orchestrating her kidnapping. Sherry's lawyers requested a sentence of 1 month in prison, followed by 7 months of house arrest. However, the prosecution recommended an 18-month sentence. In September 2022, the judge sentenced Sherry to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay a $300,000 fine. The judge doubted that Sherry would ever be able to pay the fine, saying it would take winning the lottery. During the sentencing, the judge called Sherry a manipulator and habitual liar, stating that he had no doubt she would have continued lying if she hadn't been caught. The judge told Sherry that she needed to be punished to stop others from committing similar crimes. Sherry had taken advantage of many resources, including money meant for victims, Social Security disability payments, and a GoFundMe account set up after her fake kidnapping. The judge wanted to deter others from committing similar crimes by punishing Sherry. She spoke at her sentencing hearing, expressing regret and apologizing to those who had suffered because of her actions. Sherry acknowledged her guilt, saying she was responsible for lying and bringing shame to herself and those around her. In August 2023, Sherry was released from prison and moved to a halfway house. Sherry and her husband Keith separated on the day of her arrest in March 2022. After Sherry pleaded guilty, Keith filed for divorce the next month and sought full custody of their children. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carol Maltesi. Carol Nicole Maltesi was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, he never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally broke up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20th, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos, although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed. The skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte, but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the end of March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, let's listen to the case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela. Her mother, Andrina Bermudos Millian, hailed from Maturin, Monagas. Her father, Leonardo Salazar, came from Tucupita, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. A year after Paula's birth, in September 2016, the couple decided to immigrate with their child to Ecuador. They were seeking better opportunities for themselves and their daughter. Shortly after relocating to Quito, the capital of Ecuador, the family dynamic began to deteriorate due to various reasons. Andrina made the decision to separate from Leonardo and moved with Paula to Cuenca, Ecuador's third largest city. In Cuenca lived the mother of Andrina's best friend. She kindly offered them lodging while they sought a new place and means of employment. Meanwhile, given the circumstances and breakup, Leonardo decided to return to Venezuela. He eventually emigrated again, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had long been disabled. An accident during his youth had left his left arm entirely incapacitated. This disability made securing stable employment challenging even in Quito. Following her move to Cuenca, Andrina almost cut off communication with Leonardo completely. She informed him just once that she had secured work on a farm in Tabacundo. A few months after parting ways with Leonardo, Andrina entered into a new relationship with Washington Andreas Aymaro, a local Ecuadorian and owner of the farm where she worked. Washington came from a wealthy family. When Paula reached about 18 months old, Andrina moved in with Washington, along with Paula. On April 7, 2019, Andrina and Washington welcomed a child together. This marked a period of happiness and unity for the family. However, everything changed dramatically on March 27, 2020. An event occurred that profoundly impacted all involved parties' lives. During that period, the family was living well, enjoying each day on the farm, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. One day Andreas decided to take to the flower plantations by car. However, en route, the girl became very ill. She felt dizzy and began to vomit. Left with no choice, Andreas stopped at a public restroom. As soon as they entered the restroom, Paula vomited again. Andreas decided to leave her alone for a few minutes while he went back to the car to retrieve a change of clothes since hers were dirty. Upon his return, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He immediately pulled her out and attempted first aid before rushing her to the hospital. When the 4-year-old was handed over to medical professionals, she showed no signs of life. Doctors declared Paula deceased after performing an initial examination. They quickly noticed inconsistencies in Andreas's story. For instance, they observed bruises on her body and face that did not match his account. Medical protocols require doctors to notify police in such situations, which they did right away. Police arrived shortly thereafter and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's death. Although he claimed she had drowned in the toilet bowl, the autopsy revealed a more troubling reality. Tests showed that Paula had been dead for approximately 24 hours when she arrived at the hospital. This contradicted Andreas's timeline of events. He stated that he had given her first aid and cardiopulmonary resuscitation just 20 minutes before taking her there. Moreover, the autopsy uncovered severe injuries, several broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, all contributing factors to her death. It became clear that Paula's death was not an accident. Her small body bore numerous recent and old injuries. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, learned of her death on March 33, days after the events transpired. His mother, who remained in Venezuela, informed him via phone. She had learned about it through a friend of Andrina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andrina began a new relationship and ceased all communication with him. Consequently, For 3 days, Leonardo was unaware of the tragedy. During that time, he could only see Paula through pictures sent by Andreina and their mutual friends. Additionally, Andreina blocked Leonardo on all social media platforms, preventing any form of communication with Paula. She also cut off contact with almost all of Leonardo's relatives. It is worth noting that she turned most of their mutual friends against Leonardo by portraying him as disinterested in maintaining a relationship with Paula. Despite these challenges, Leonardo was determined to learn about his daughter's death. However, Andreina's family provided an alternative explanation for her passing. At that time, Ecuador, like much of the world, was under quarantine due to the pandemic. Understandably skeptical about this claim, Leonardo began researching virus-related deaths in the country through social media and news sites. He quickly found no children among the few victims. With the assistance of his relatives, Leonardo continued his investigation. One relative sent him a newspaper article reporting the arrest of Andreina on suspicion of killing Paula. Persistently seeking answers, he called Andreina daily until she finally returned his call 10 days later. Because her lawyers had forbidden her to, the next step Leonardo took was to create a Facebook page with an acquaintance of his. This page was dedicated to Paula. They also set up an Instagram profile called Justice for Paula. The posts they published caused a huge backlash across social media, the main goal to bring those responsible for his daughter's death to justice. On the same day that Andreina called Leonardo, she arrived at the morgue to begin arranging her daughter's funeral. Even though the prosecutor working on the case asked for more time to investigate the body, Paula's funeral still took place on April 10, 2020. Andreina did not allow a second autopsy to be performed on Paula. Thanks to information posted on social media and shared by Andreina's friends, people in her circle contacted Leonardo and told him about Paula's sad life before her death. They sent Leonardo various pieces of information they had collected, most of which were isolated recordings of conversations, photos, audio clips, and similar items. According to witnesses, ever since Paula's mother moved in with Andreas, Paula had endured abuse from both her stepfather and her own mother. Not only did Andrea allow her daughter to be treated this way, but she herself was directly involved in it. Everyone noted that Paula seemed happy and cheerful only when she was playing alone. In the presence of her stepfather, she appeared depressed, acted shy, and became suddenly very fearful. At one point, the little girl told people she trusted that her mother and stepfather would beat her if she misbehaved. One day she even confessed that as punishment, Andreas pushed her into a wall where she hit her head. Paula referred to her stepfather as nothing less than a monster, and was undoubtedly very afraid of him. She constantly had nightmares and suffered from insomnia at a young age. The couple initially preferred that the girl, who was 2 years old at the time they moved into the stepfather's home, sleep alone when falling asleep. Paula often cried, but no one paid any attention to her. Additionally, her mother and stepfather forced her to manage on her own without assistance. Moreover, her mother Andreina had been teaching her how to cook since she was 2 years old, which seemed unreasonable. Paula was compelled to prepare her own breakfast and dinners because her mother preferred to sleep in the mornings and take a break from caregiving in the evenings. She simply did not want to care for her daughter. Andreina did not mind that Paula had to handle the oven by herself, despite the inherent dangers. At preschool, where Andreina had enrolled Paula, the girl frequently complained of pain in her legs and back, and often mentioned she could not walk. Her constant complaints, along with the bruises on her body, prompted the teacher to show her to doctors at a health center. After an examination, they concluded that Paula was being mistreated at home. The teachers then called a special police organization to investigate the abuse within Paula's family. Officials took up the case and decided to send Paula somewhere safe while they conducted their investigation. Consequently, on October 16, 2019, Paula was temporarily transferred to her uncle's care, Andreina's brother. A hearing on the matter was set for December 4, 2019. Unfortunately, the teachers who were supposed to testify never appeared for reasons unknown. As a result, they scheduled a retrial for February 27, 2020. However, once again, all the teachers failed to attend. Consequently, the court had no option but to dismiss all charges against Paula's parents and return her to her mother. 1 month later, on March 27th, Paula passed away. The exact reasons why the teachers chose not to attend either hearing remain unknown. It is speculated that Andreina might have bribed or persuaded them that although Paula had some issues, it wasn't due to any wrongdoing by her parents. After Paula's tragic death, Andreas was placed in protective custody during the investigation. Soon appealed this decision, resulting in a hearing on June 12, 2020. At the hearing, which was held via video conference, the judge set an order and determined Andreas could be released to house arrest. However, during the hearing, Andreas announced that he was withdrawing his appeal. At that time, Leonardo was still conducting a social media campaign and asked his subscribers for financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador. His goal was to file a complaint against Andreina, Paula's mother, before it became too late. Andreina had not yet been charged and remained free. Fortunately, Leonardo managed to secure sufficient financial aid as well as free legal advice from 2 Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. They generously offered him support and assistance with the lawsuit. Leonardo faced significant challenges to reach Ecuador. He had to cross the border between Trinidad and Venezuela by rafting across dangerous waters, and then travel across rugged terrain. Due to the pandemic, all regular maritime and land borders of Venezuela were closed. Thus, only a few flights were available to a handful of countries. Once Leonardo arrived in Táchira State, he crossed into Colombia over hazardous terrain. From there, he took a bus to Ipiales and continued onward through hills and plains until reaching Rumichaca Bridge, the border between Colombia and Ecuador. Upon crossing into Ecuador, Leonardo took a cab to Quito. On June 30th, he immediately met with a lawyer upon arrival. The bereaved father filed a complaint against his ex-girlfriend, so she would also be considered a suspect in Paula's murder. By July 6, 2020, an indictment was issued against Andreina. She appeared in court, where it was decided that house arrest would suffice instead of full custody. In November 2020, the initial hearing for the case took place. Although a specific trial date had not yet been determined at that time, participation and discussions were intense. Leonardo's attorney voiced concerns about Andreina's potential escape risk, as she had previously attempted suicide using pills. The lawyer requested that Andreina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. The judge this request, and also reduced her required court appearances to once a week instead of twice. However, shortly after, Andreina requested a reconsideration regarding the necessity of wearing the electronic bracelet. Consequently, another hearing was held on November 16th to review this decision. These developments inevitably caused delays in the trial proceedings, but eventually, the judge set a new date for December. Despite limited media coverage of Andreas and Andreina's trial, much information found its way onto social media platforms. However, due to the pandemic dominating news coverage at the time, some details remained unreported. The trial began on January 14, 2021. At that point, no final decision had been made regarding Andreina's alternative imprisonment options, while Andreas remained detained at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was conducted behind closed doors, with no media representatives present. Some participants attended via video link to ensure proceedings continued smoothly despite restrictions. According to testimony from the doctor who performed Paula's autopsy, several disturbing findings were made. Nearly all of her spinal discs had been rebuilt. She suffered broken ribs, some of which had fused naturally over time, and she displayed symptoms like nail stigmata, where nails grow into the skin, as well as bruises and scratches on her face and body. Furthermore, there was fluid accumulation in her lungs and serious injuries, such as scars on her head and lacerations on her colon. These medical findings suggested prolonged physical trauma before Paula's death and became critical evidence in understanding what transpired during her final days. The later injuries were what caused the infection to develop into sepsis, ultimately leading to death. The autopsy report confirmed that by the time took Paula to the hospital, she had been deceased for approximately 24 hours. The extent of her internal and external injuries revealed the severity of cruelty she had endured, as well as the negligence of her guardians, who never once sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was malnourished, underweight, and too small for her age, with clear mineral and nutritional deficiencies. Regarding Paula's injuries, her mother Andreina tried to persuade family and friends that Paula had numerous psychological problems. She asserted that these issues led to self-harm behaviors, which were attempts by Paula to attract attention. According to Andreina, when Paula's younger brother was born, Paula began lacking parental attention, stopped sleeping at night, and attempted to manipulate everyone through crying. In October 2019, even though Paula was supposed to stay with her uncle per a board's decision, she actually continued staying at her parents' house most of the time, and only slept at her uncle's house occasionally. This indicates that measures taken by authorities did not achieve their intended outcomes. Furthermore, it was established that in 2017, shortly after Leonardo's departure from Ecuador, Paula began experiencing abuse, likely starting right after Andreina entered into a relationship with Andreas. At the trial attended by over 40 witnesses from the accusing party, it was confirmed that Paula endured abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final hearing before the judge delivered the verdict, Andreina claimed full responsibility for the child's abuse. She admitted to beating Paula with a belt and sometimes using her fists. Through this statement, Andreina attempted to deflect blame away from her partner Andreas. She stated emphatically that he was innocent, that he had no involvement in the matter, and that he had never mistreated Paula. Andreina also mentioned that she had reprimanded her daughter for causing issues with her new husband. Breaking up with him meant returning to the streets and losing the financial stability she could only gain through his support. Taking care of her daughter was not her main concern. Upon reviewing Paula's circumstances, the judges expressed concern for the couple's newborn son. However, they noted that this child, unlike Paula, was never abused. It is worth mentioning that Andreas opted to exercise his right to remain silent and has not commented on the incident since his arrest on February 3, 2021. Paula's trial concluded with both defendants being found guilty of murdering the girl. The maximum penalty for this crime is 13 years. Leonardo's original attorneys and the prosecution sought the maximum punishment for the perpetrators. However, considering an aggravating factor that Paula was just 4 years old and unable to defend herself, the chief judge sentenced Andreina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. According to Ecuadorian law, convicted individuals have 3 days to appeal a verdict. The couple, as anticipated, indicated their intention to do so immediately. Despite being sentenced to 17 years and 4 months in prison, Andre remained under house arrest instead of being jailed directly. She utilized her opportunity to appeal, necessitating higher court confirmation of her incarceration sentence. Meanwhile, she continues to follow the previously imposed measures. This situation is markedly different from Andreas' case. He was detained upon his appearance at the hospital with a deceased girl. Public outrage has been palpable over Andreina remaining at large. Of particular note is Leonardo's anger and concern over her potentially evading justice. A garbage collector was paralyzed on January 22, 2023, after sifting through a trash container near the Columbia Park to find what was at the bottom of it. A blue suitcase was inside, sealed with black tape, and surrounded by several garbage bags. The suitcase contained a woman's body, which was easily identified because her head was visible from the suitcase. The worker was frightened upon finding something, so he drove several blocks and reported it to the police. The Capitol Police promptly dispatched a team of officers to investigate. Can you provide some examples? The police officers who arrived were met with a horrifying scene. The corpse was cradled in the suitcase and taken away. Valentina Trespalacios was identified as the victim a few hours later. At the outset, the body was found to be free from any indications of violence, firearms, or knives, and it was not dismembered. Can you provide some examples? After opening the suitcase, detectives discovered that the woman was wearing pajamas with a belt, suggesting that she had been attacked while sleeping by the person who killed her. A black cardboard box on the side of the suitcase contained items that helped identify the body. Police found a student ID, password used by the victim when applying for a certificate, as well as some documents and personal belongings among them. The investigating team found it peculiar, as the presence of documents in such cases was not typical. Can you provide some examples? The police contacted the woman's family after finding the suitcase with her body, and they confirmed that she was with friends on Saturday, January 21st. The woman was found to have been struck multiple times in the head during the forensic examination. Her body was found with multiple injuries, including bleeding from the right part of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck that indicated strangulation. Valentina Trespalacios was born on December 16, 2001 in Bogotá, Colombia. She was enrolled in the Faculty of Commerce and International Business. The girl was a music enthusiast from an early age. After completing her professional DJ diploma, she was granted access to work as a DJ in Colombia due to her exceptional talent and musical sense. She had a career that began 3 years ago and resulted in many foreign friends. Valentina traveled to other countries, where she typically gained knowledge or exhibited her accomplishments. She had the chance to perform alongside some of the most renowned musicians during this period. She toured over 20 cities in the country and was present at significant international events of this kind. Her past activities involved performing at festivals and touring throughout Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. People in her vicinity claimed that she had a bright future ahead. She was sought after and traveled throughout the nation. She dominated the best nightclubs and pursued her passion. Valentina was a very happy, smiling young girl who enjoyed the party. She maintained social media accounts where she shared her stage performances and always kept her followers informed about her daily routine. Can you provide some examples? In the electronic music industry of Colombia, she was recently recognized as the best amateur DJ. The girl shared about 2 things on her social media: her rising popularity in the electronic music industry at nightclubs and her relationship with an American named John Poulos, whom she met online by the end of 2021. John and Valentina's communication skills improved as time passed. Valentina's initial desire for stability and commitment was not strong, but her relationship with him transformed into a romantic partnership that the young people eventually shared. John Poulos was a resident of America. Valentina was so invested in her life that he sent her money to attend the cosmetic course that involved injecting her lips with hyaluronic acid. The procedure was repeated to improve her cheekbones, and John also suggested surgery and silicone breast implants for his partner, modifying her appearance within a few months and becoming the talk of the town. He started sending money to the girl on a regular basis and eventually came up with the idea of marrying her. Originally, Poulos had plans to move to Colombia and live with Valentina, but she was skeptical because this person was so envious that he hired a private detective to track all her contacts and activities. Valentina's family was highly suspicious, as she expressed her concern about this situation. John Poulos was prepared to spend the rest of his life with his partner by January 2023. He was committed to marrying Valentina and initiated the process of organizing the necessary paperwork. He rented an apartment in the northern area of Bogotá, where he planned to spend the weekends with the girl until they found a permanent place to live. On Thursday, January 19th, Poulos arrived in Bogotá. Around 8:53 p.m., he was caught on surveillance footage entering the building's apartment. Along with him, there was a blue suitcase that bore resemblance to the one used to find Valentina's corpse. John Poulos was the first person to be noticed after the disturbing discovery, as he was also the last one to have seen Valentina alive. The detective's attempt to reach him resulted in the call being diverted to voicemail. Valentina's family members found Poulos to be a kind and collected individual. His demeanor was undeniable, and his plans to marry the young woman were evident. They were unable to fathom his involvement in this terrible crime, but these doubts were eliminated when investigators arrived at the apartment rental building, where it was discovered that the man had already left and was not found. On Monday, January 23rd, John Poulos took down his social media profiles in the early morning following Valentina's death. He was the sole suspect at that point. The revelation was made evident when investigators analyzed the surveillance camera footage in the building. From Friday evening to early Sunday morning, the Colombian Police and Prosecutor's Office examined hours of video footage from cameras in the areas where the young woman and her boyfriend were. The trash container was where the body was disposed of at this point. The footage and numerous WhatsApp conversations were instrumental in uncovering the girl's final hours. On January 20th, Valentina and Poulos made a deal to meet. Can you provide some examples? The man arrived on the 19th, the day before, and took up residence in the apartment where the couple had planned to live. After he texted Valentina, they started arguing on the same night because she was at a party with her friend and didn't anticipate him coming over. He inquired about the presence of significant individuals at the gathering and whether she was with any male. She wryly replied with a no reply, stating that it was his suspicions, and they had agreed to meet on the 20th. Prior to meeting John, Valentina had planned to visit various locations to care for herself, apply her lash extensions, and attend hair salons. On January 20th, the couple were unable to see each other due to their disagreement, and only in the evening, when Valentina's apartment was being monitored by surveillance cameras, did they know exactly when they were in that parking lot. The girls' possessions were being packed by John at 6 p.m. as the two of them moved to another apartment and began a new life. Valentina's journey across the country was marked by a series of emotional goodbyes, one of which was with her family and friends. She made a video call to her mother saying that she was going home. The video depicts the girl accompanied by Poulos, who hired a vehicle to transport Valentina's possessions. They were caught on surveillance footage entering the apartment with their possessions at 7 p.m. Valentina sent her mother a series of videos showing the apartment in their frequent exchanges to get things. The cameras captured them completing the move and engaging in other activities before heading back to their new home. It was Saturday, January 21st at 1 a.m. Around 3 a.m., the couple arranged a taxi to go to southeastern New York's nightclub, where Valentina was set to perform 2 hours later. Can you provide some examples? The club was reached by them at approximately 4 a.m. Valentina commenced work almost immediately. While she was busy, John Poulos remained with her. Can you provide some examples? At approximately 5 a.m., her performance concluded. Valentina and John, holding hands, headed to the nightclub's office. They encountered the proprietor of the establishment, his spouse, and her companion. Valentina's friends had not seen her since they'd left the venue at 6 a.m. Her smile was back on her face, shining brightly, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Valentina contacted her friend on the phone and stated that she had no intention of going anywhere on Saturday. She stated that she would probably stay in the apartment with her partner. Later on, they might go out to eat or cook together at their house. The last time Valentina spoke to her friend was at 9 p.m., and it was through video. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, revealed that her 13-year-old son was the final individual to converse with her on video. The girl was in bed with John. They both appeared to be in a state of happiness. The family had no further information about them. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building captured the young woman and her boyfriend. In the video, Valentina can be seen peering out of the apartment door while John stands in front of it. He seems contemplative and a little menacing, pacing back and forth, occasionally grimacing his face. He orders the elevator to go down and retrieve a delivery. Poulos was captured by the cameras again on Sunday, January 22nd at 9 a.m. He exits the room with 2 bags of garbage. Valentina was nowhere to be found on this occasion. The man drives to the parking area, takes a silver car, and places the bags in the back seat. Following that, He goes back to the apartment and retrieves 2 suitcases from the trunk. Subsequently, he heads back to the apartment. A gray blanket covers the suitcase that Poulos removed from the apartment, where the clock reads 10 a.m. He put it into a cart for shipping. A second bag was situated beside it. Valentina's head was wrapped in the blanket. The man surveys the parking area after parking. He perceives that nobody is in the vicinity. Moving ahead, he looks over to make sure nobody is going down in the elevator. Subsequently, he rapidly makes his way back to the vehicle. He glances at the mirror one last time and takes a sip of water before struggling to lift the heavy suitcase, which he puts in the trunk. The bag is the next item on the list. Subsequently, he takes control of the vehicle and departs. Surveillance cameras caught the car at different locations throughout the city around noon. It was evident that the subject was in search of a suitable spot to leave the suitcase. The car entered one of the parks and parked near the garbage containers at approximately 3 p.m. The driver exited and headed towards the container at that juncture. He surveyed the area, verified that no one was watching, and then removed the suitcase, which seemed excessive, before tossing it into the container. He went back to the car and removed the bag, which he then placed in the trash bin, closed the lid, and exited. The vehicle was traveling westward until it reached El Dorado International Airport. John's last known whereabouts were at the airport at 4:30 p.m. A $1 million reward was announced by the Ministry of Security on Monday, January 23rd, for any information that could lead to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios. The Colombian authorities enlisted the help of Interpol to issue an arrest warrant, as Poulos fled the country's border without indicating why. Additionally, he was the final person to witness the girl's existence. Can you provide some examples? On January 24th, the National Police of Panama stated that they had apprehended Poulos at El Dorado International Airport while he was traveling to Turkey. In an effort to obtain answers about Valentina's death, Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting him to the country. Over 14 criminal investigation specialists contributed to the investigation, collecting evidence to establish the facts. The analysis of over 300 hours of video footage from cameras was the outcome of methodological work carried out in partnership with the country's prosecutor office. The case yielded another crucial finding after the arrest of this individual. Valentina's mobile phone was discovered near the El Dorado International Airport by a security staff member. He stumbled upon a mobile phone on the grass while walking near a 10th of a minute gas station and picked it up. The man brought the discovered gadget home after he realized that it did not have a SIM card. He took the phone to sell it, unaware that it belonged to Valentina. The security guard's wife called him hours later in despair when she realized that the photo of the girl and the wallpaper on the mobile phone were identical to those seen on social media, and also for the young woman found dead in the trash container. Unfortunately, the phone had already been marked for sale and repackaged because someone was willing to buy it. Therefore, information that could have been advantageous in this situation went unguarded. Can you provide some examples? Following that, the driver of the car that the couple had driven to the nightclub gave his testimony, which was followed by a big question. The driver was tasked with transporting the couple to a nightclub located in the southern part of the city. Before getting into the car, Poulos paused for a moment before Valentina exited. She got into the car and screamed that she had written something untoward. The driver looked at her in disbelief before checking his phone and finding out that Tres Palacios had sent him a message to customer care, warning him in Spanish that he was in danger. The driver looked at the girl and inquired if she was all right, but her response was uncertain as Poulos entered the car and asked. She said, "Are you okay?" John and Valentina conversed in English as the car was being driven, and the man asked if they were bilingual, to which he replied with a positive answer. Poulos remained silent and instead corresponded with Valentina on WhatsApp. Upon leaving about 4 a.m., the driver went to the nightclub with the couple and then forgot about the incident until he was informed of the young woman's death several days later. Due to Valentina's open WhatsApp session, Her friend who lived in Cartagena came to the prosecutor office in Bogota and surrendered their computer, with the chats providing clues about what had occurred. One of the pieces of evidence found in Valentina's chat was that her friend had spotted a suitcase with her body, which was said to have been there. The friend said that on the same day Valentina was in Bogota, she got a text from Poulos and received several selfies with his luggage. The suitcase that John brought with him was akin to the one found by authorities in the container. The color was indistinguishable. There's no clear answer as to why the young girl left her WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer, but all of these texts helped authorities get what happened that night when Valentina was killed. It was determined by forensic investigators that she died from asphyxiation, caused by tightly strangled with a rope. Prior to her passing, there were indications on her body that she had been a victim of violence. All indications from the forensic examination indicate that Valentina Tres Palacios passed away while sleeping. This conclusion was drawn up by criminalists because she was wearing pajamas. There was no doubt in the evidence above that John Poulos was present. The indictment stated that the suspect did not acknowledge responsibility for the girl's death, citing the current situation and the concealment of evidence. Rather, he said, "There were violations when I was arrested in Panama because we did not have a lawyer to talk to." Poulos's Spanish language skills were not strong enough to warrant a translator, and the hearing lasted for more than 5 hours. The crime committed by Poulos is attributed to his involvement with Valentina, and he attempted to disappear without trace, erasing his social media accounts after the incident. On May 19, 1987, John Poulos was born in Wisconsin, United States. He had 3 children and was previously wedded in his native land. His criminal record included charges of violence against women, including obtaining a restraining order against his ex-wife. The use of pornographic websites was reported by a woman to whom John Poulos had sent money, who claimed that this person was actively browsing. According to her, he spent approximately 5-6 hours daily on the site, and she mentioned that despite being a man, his behavior was often bizarre in nature, such as fantasizing and recounting ghost stories. Another model who testified on a modeling page said she knew the American from Texas, America. She ceased writing to him after a peculiar comment he made, which included the words jealousy and death. John's question was, "If I were at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me?" The girl refused in response. "It's likely that one of us will die due to jealousy," replied Poulos. The witness stated that despite the subject having sent money to the magical lord, she never conversed with him on video because his communication was often unusual. It is important to acknowledge that John had certain conduct towards his victims. He contacted Valentina on social media and started sending her money with persistence and consistency in the case. This approach to women's treatment as property was a warning sign that the trusting women initially neglected, and Poulos believed he could purchase them with money from the outset. The factors were disregarded, leading to the possibility that the victim unintentionally stumbled into her abuser's trap and was eventually recognized due to his own mistake. The authorities involved in this case are assuming that John thought the waste disposal system in Colombia was equivalent to that in the United States, where he resided. According to him, the waste material had settled in the container and would eventually be disposed of. Poulos did not assume that recycling workers and street dwellers frequently sift through garbage to discover items that can be sold or employed as something. John Poulos is being held in a private cell in Bogota today. Now all that remains is to demonstrate that all these pieces of evidence connect the individual to the crime and to discover the motive behind this dreadful murder. In Colombia, the criminal code provides for a prison sentence of up to 50 years for a crime in which an American is accused, with the assistance of a special group formed by the Capitol Police in coordination with the country's Attorney General's office. Criminal investigators will be engaged in the search for material evidence to clarify this fact. Such cases once again demonstrate to us how dangerous social networks can be when getting to know someone. Valentina thought she had found love and someone with whom she would spend the rest of her days. However, this did not happen. and like many people in the world, she too thought that nothing like this would happen to her. In the quiet, mundane life sometimes lie the most extraordinary and harrowing stories. The name of Velma Barfield forever changed the narrative of crime and punishment in the United States. Her life story reads like a tragedy that challenges our perception of evil. Known to many as the death row grandma, she became the first woman executed by lethal injection in the United States, the first woman to be executed after the death penalty's reinstatement in 1976, and also the first woman executed since 1962. But how did a wife, mother, and grandmother, once cherished and loved by those who knew her, transform into one of the most notorious figures in criminal history? Born in a time of economic despair, in the shadow of the Great Depression, Velma Margie Barfield came into the world on October 29, 1932, in Eastover, North Carolina, but was raised near Fayetteville. The second of 9 children, she witnessed a constant battle against poverty from the early age. In rural North Carolina, where life was governed by the rising and setting of the sun, Velma's family toiled on their small tobacco and cotton farm. Velma's father, Murphy Bullard, was a man worn down by the hardships of farm life. His temper was as volatile as the weather that dictated their fortunes. Velma claimed he was physically and sexually abusive to her and her sisters. However, other relatives disputed this. Velma's mother, Lily Bullard, bore the brunt of her husband's frustrations. In their world, love was a luxury they could hardly afford, leaving Velma and her siblings to navigate a childhood marked by emotional absence and the ever-present threat of violence. At a young age, Velma observed the financial differences between herself and her peers. That's when her first criminal activity started. She initially took small amounts of cash from her father to buy little things that she saw her classmates enjoying. Her petty thefts escalated to taking $80 from an elderly neighbor. When her father discovered that, he beat her severely, and Velma stopped stealing for the remainder of her childhood. Raised in a Christian household, young Velma found solace in the pages of her Bible, clinging to faith in the turmoil of her home life. This early introduction to religion was a constant amidst chaos. Yet, as she transitioned to adolescence, the psychological scars left by her upbringing would shape the woman she would later become. The world around was convulsed by World War II. The war, though distant, exacerbated the hardships faced by her family and deepened the fractures within. Velma, like many of her generation, was forced to grow up quickly. Her dreams and aspirations were often overshadowed by the pressing needs of survival and duty to family. Yet it was during this time that her resilience and tenacity began to shine through, qualities that would define her in both commendable and tragic ways. As Velma stepped into early adulthood, her desire for a life beyond the confines of her home grew stronger. She dreamed of escape. At the age of 17, she dropped out of school. The search for love and stability led Velma into the arms of Thomas Burke, a union that promised freedom, but instead brought new hardships. By 19, she had 2 children, a son, Ron, and a daughter, Kim. The family lived happily in Parkton, North Carolina, for over 15 years. Velma's life with Thomas seemed a hard-earned escape from the poverty and violence of her childhood. Everything changed in 1965 when Thomas got into a serious car crash and suffered head injuries. To cope with the intense pain and headaches caused by his injuries, he became a heavy drinker and drug user. His struggle with alcohol mirrored the demons of Velma's father, reigniting the traumas of her past. The cycle of abuse and neglect she vowed never to repeat began to encroach upon her own family. It was during these turbulent years that Velma's resilience was put to the ultimate test. The pressures of an unhappy marriage, the responsibilities of motherhood, and the patterns of her past weighed heavily on her soul. Velma started a job at a textile factory, but soon had to quit due to health problems. She underwent an urgent hysterectomy, which left her feeling insecure about her femininity. After the surgery, she suffered from debilitating back pain and turned to prescription drugs. What began as a means to cope soon spiraled into addiction that eroded her judgment and set the stage for the tragedies to come. Her journey was not a plunge, but a gradual descent. each step marked by an increasing desperation to maintain the illusion of control. On April 4, 1969, Velma had a fierce argument with her husband. Later that day, when she and the children were away, the house caught fire. Thomas, who remained inside, died from smoke inhalation, and the house was burned to the ground. Velma and the kids moved in with her parents. A few months after her husband's death, Velma started dating a widower, Jennings Barfield. They married in August 1970. One day, the couple had an argument, after which Jennings became mysteriously ill. On March 21, 1971, he died of a heart attack. Velma moved into her parents' home again. Soon after that, her father died of lung cancer. In the summer of 1974, her mother suffered severe stomach pain and was taken to the hospital. As she got better, she returned home. In August 1974, a man Velma was dating died in a car accident. On December 30th of the same year, her mother was taken to the hospital again with similar symptoms of a severe stomach illness. Doctors couldn't help her this time, nor could they diagnose her illness, and she died after 2 hours. No autopsy was performed. As mysterious deaths around Velma continued, her son, Ronnie Burke, said, "It's the saddest thing, but it seems like everybody my mother ever gets close to dies. How could the good Lord allow this to happen to a faithful Christian like Velma Barfield?" The financial strain of her addiction led to another unethical decision, forging checks to sustain her growing needs. But deceit has its price, and the trust within the community began to fray. Velma found herself trapped in a web of her own making. In 1975, she was convicted of 7 counts of writing bad checks and sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, she was released after serving 3 months. Upon her release in 1976, Velma took a job as a caretaker for the elderly. Initially, she worked for 94-year-old Montgomery Edwards and his 84-year-old wife Dolly in Lumberton, North Carolina. Montgomery fell ill and died on January 29, 1977. A few weeks later, in February, Dolly developed symptoms of a stomach illness similar to those of Velma's mother and died on March 1st. Velma then started looking after 76-year-old Record Lee, who had broken her leg. On June 4, 1977, Lee's husband, John Henry, began to suffer severe pains in his stomach and chest. Doctors diagnosed his condition as a severe stomach virus. He died later that month. Later, in 1977, Velma moved in with her boyfriend Roland Stewart Taylor, a relative of Dolly Edwards. He was a widower and tobacco farmer. One day, they were attending a Pentecostal revival meeting in Cumberland County. Suddenly, Stewart complained of severe stomach pain. He was taken to the hospital, where he died after a few days. The search for truth begins in the quietest of ways. A question, a doubt, a pressing need for answers. Suspicion grew in the hearts of those who had watched Stewart's health decline under mysterious circumstances. It was their persistence that first brought the authorities to Velma's doorstep, initiating a chain of events that would lead to shocking revelations. An autopsy was ordered. The investigation into Stewart Taylor's death was methodical. Each test, each interview, each piece of evidence added another layer of suspicion around Velma. In the world of criminal investigations, breakthroughs often come with a faint clue, a moment of intuition, a connection previously unseen. For the team pursuing justice for Stewart Taylor and the other victims, it came in the form of forensic evidence. Arsenic became the linchpin in unraveling the mystery, traces of which were found in Stewart's system. Before the autopsy results were declared, Lumberton police received an anonymous phone call, reportedly from Velma's sister, who said that Velma had poisoned Taylor and others. Subsequently, Velma was arrested on charges of murdering Stewart Taylor. After her arrest, the body of Jennings Barfield was exhumed, and traces of arsenic were found. The unraveling of Velma's carefully constructed lies began. The art of interrogation is delicate, a push and pull between investigator and suspect. Each question a probe into the darkest corners of the human heart. For Velma, the questions posed by her interrogators mirrored the ones she had long avoided within herself. It was in this room, under the weight of evidence and the scrutiny of the law, that the walls she had built to separate her actions from her conscience could no longer hold as the truth clawed its way to the surface. In search of solace, Velma turned to a spiritual advisor. It was in this desperate hope for redemption that she found the strength to confront her past. For her, the path to confession was a journey back to her soul. With a voice tinged with regret, Velma began to speak. A torrent of truths, long dammed by fear, shame, and denial, flowed forth. Her confession became a source of deep, lasting pain for her own family, who were unwittingly caught in her web of deceit. The woman they loved and the horrible crimes she committed were now inseparably linked, challenging their notions of forgiveness and the very foundations of their understanding of right and wrong. She confessed to poisoning Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, John Henry Lee, her mother Lillian, and her boyfriend Stuart Taylor. Despite the fact that arsenic was found in Jennings Barfield's body, Velma denied killing him. The motive for the murders was stealing money from her victims to support her clandestine addiction to prescription drugs. She had also taken out a loan in her mother's name. Each of her tragic choices, made under the influence of pain, had a devastating impact on her destiny and the people around her. Faced with the threat of exposure, Velma took a step that irrevocably altered the course of her life. The path from one crime to another can often be a slippery slope. She found herself repeating the unthinkable. Every time, Velma went to her victims' funerals and seemed to sincerely mourn their loss. The burden of her secret pushed her further into isolation. Yet, the resilient human psyche, adept at self-preservation, often takes refuge in justification to shield itself from the unbearable truth and finds ways to rationalize even the darkest deeds. Every time Velma stole money from her victims, then poisoned them as they got suspicious. To the outside world, she remained a devout churchgoer, a seemingly caring nurse, and a loving family member. But her moral compass, once guided by faith, now veered into a realm of denial, caught in a constant struggle between the remnants of her conscience and the overwhelming desire to escape the consequences of her actions. She was forging checks on her boyfriend Stuart Taylor's account. Presumably, he discovered that. So she mixed an arsenic-based rat poison into his beer and tea, determined to maintain her secret at any cost. At the trial, Velma's defense pleaded insanity, but this was not accepted. She appeared cold and uncaring. She laughed at the prosecutor and even gave the district attorney a round of applause after his closing speech. The prosecution painted a picture of Velma not as the church-going grandmother she purported to be, but as a calculating murderer driven by darkness. She was the architect of her own fate, and her actions deserved the utmost penalty. The defense, in turn, sought to humanize her, portraying her not as a monster, but as a troubled soul ensnared by addiction, abuse, and circumstances beyond her control, highlighting her mental health struggles as a mitigating factor in her crimes. In the world of law and order, the truth is often more complex than it appears, inseparable from human emotions. Although she eventually confessed to 6 murders, she was convicted only of the first-degree murder of Stuart Taylor in December 1978. The trial jury found aggravating circumstances and sentenced her to death. For the victims' families, the verdict was an acknowledgement of their irreplaceable loss. A designated holding area for female death row prisoners did not exist at the time, and Velma was the only female death row inmate in North Carolina. So, she was imprisoned at Central Prison in Raleigh, in an area for escape-prone prisoners and prisoners with mental illnesses. Subsequently, a unit for female death row inmates was established at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. While on death row, Velma was off the drugs and expressed remorse for the years that the pills had blurred her judgment and destroyed her moral compass. In the solitude of her cell, she began the arduous process of confronting her past. The nights were long, the faces of her victims haunted her dreams, and the silence served as a backdrop for her thoughts and regrets. It was during these moments of reflection that Velma faced the full magnitude of her actions, the lives she had taken, and the pain she had caused. Her conversations with the prison chaplain were not just about seeking forgiveness from a higher power, but about understanding the nature of atonement and the painstaking process of forgiving oneself. In jail, Velma confessed that she had never been a true Christian. Her Christianity had been a matter of form and gesture. Then, finally, while waiting for her trial, she genuinely opened her heart to Jesus and received forgiveness and salvation. She wrote in her autobiography, All my life I was weighted down by my sins because I couldn't do better. It never occurred to me that Jesus really did pay the price, that Jesus alone bore the extreme punishment, death, for my sins, not just for my good neighbors. And even more glorious, Jesus is willing to be my friend even now. I can talk to him and he will listen. She became a devout Christian and spent her 6 final years ministering to other inmates. Velma, in her own way, became a source of support to them. Her involvement in spiritual activities offered her a sense of community and belonging that had eluded her for much of her life. Her extensive participation in the Christian community led to a campaign to have her sentence commuted from death to life imprisonment. She wrote letters to Governor Jim Hunt telling him that her born-again Christian faith should be considered as a mitigating factor. She received support from many Christians across the United States, including evangelists Billy and Ruth Graham. Ruth kept in touch with Velma by mail. Her victims' families, however, considered Velma's conversion a fraud and a ploy to save her life. To them, she was a woman who had killed their loved ones. Velma remained a loving mother and a caring grandmother. She enjoyed family visits every weekend and spent time with her children and grandchildren. Her new attorney, Richard Burr, said about her, "The person I saw was kind, sensitive, and loving. There was no hidden agenda with Velma. Whenever you were with her, she was who she was. From what I understand, that's how she lived her life in prison. So, from the very beginning, I believed that when she committed those crimes, it was not the Velma Barfield mentally and emotionally that I was seeing and getting to know." Burr believed that Velma's pre-trial evaluations were inadequate, so he turned to psychiatrist Selwyn Rose. Dr. Rose evaluated Velma in 1980 and testified in the state court. He said that she suffered from 3 disorders: a multiple prescription drug abuse disorder, an underlying personality disorder, and depression. However, Dr. Rose never felt as if he had put together a complete picture of Velma. As Burr had no license to practice in North Carolina, he now assisted Velma's new lawyer, Jimmy Little. As time was running out, Velma's son, Ronnie Burke, asked her if she had killed his father. She replied, "I'm sure I probably did." She couldn't remember clearly, but she believed that she had left a cigarette or a match in the bed and then closed the door, leaving her drunk husband to sleep in their burning house. She also admitted to the pastor who helped her write Woman on Death Row that she had murdered Jennings Barfield. Velma said she was glad that this was finally over because she was afraid that she was going to poison her grandchildren. She didn't know why she did it, but she did it, and it was not something she could stop. North Carolina's governor refused Velma's request for clemency and said that her victims had been literally tortured to death. Additionally, an appeal was made based on testimony from a psychiatry professor who asserted that she suffered from dissociative identity disorder. Professor Dorothy Lewis, professor of psychiatry at New York University School of Medicine and an expert in violent behavior, picked up patterns of manic episodes in Velma's earlier life associated with the development of a manic depressive disorder. She said she had talked to Velma's other personality, Billy, who told her Velma had been a victim of sexual abuse and that he, Billy, had killed her abusers. The judge responded to this by saying, "One of them did it. I don't care which one." Velma's final appeal was filed on October 30th, 1984, in the North Carolina Supreme Court, based on her being incompetent at her original trial due to her drug addiction. This appeal was denied in federal court. She told her attorney, Jimmy Little, to drop all appeals the day before she was executed, explaining that she wanted to die with as much dignity as the state of North Carolina will allow. Her last hours were spent in reflection and prayer, seeking comfort in her faith. As she was preparing for death, the famous pastor Billy Graham told her over the phone, "Velma, in a way I envy you because you're going to get to heaven before I do." Velma was executed on November 2nd, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh. She released a statement before her execution. "I want to say that I am sorry for all the hurt that I have caused. I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me all these 6 years. I want to thank my family for standing with me through all this, and my attorneys and all the support to me, everybody, the people with the prison department. I appreciate everything, their kindness and everything that they have shown me during these 6 years. As her last meal, she chose a bag of cheese doodles and a Coca-Cola. She received final visits from her family members and friends. She wasn't scared and told one of them, "When I go into that gas chamber at 2 a.m., it's my gateway to heaven." She was wearing pink pajamas for the execution. A stethoscope and heart monitor were taped to her chest. The wheeled gurney was brought to her cell, and she was fastened to it with straps across her body and legs. Then she was wheeled into the execution chamber shortly before 2 a.m. Crowds of pro- and anti-death penalty demonstrators gathered outside the prison. Some of the protesters accused Governor Hunt of refusing to show mercy and compassion, arguing that she could lead a life of value behind bars and help other prisoners. Richard Burr said, "Politics and death have been mixed up in this case." Inmates were banging rhythmically on the windows of their cells, waiting for the execution. About 80 people who were in favor of capital punishment cheered and applauded. The execution was carried out by 3 volunteers. One of the intravenous lines was a dummy, so that none of the volunteers knew which of them actually administered the lethal dose. Velma was declared dead at 2:15 a.m., 15 minutes after being administered the injection of procuronium bromide. Observers at the execution reported that she passed away peacefully, with no apparent suffering or pain. About 300 opponents of the death penalty stood in silent vigil, carrying candles that were extinguished as the moment of the execution passed. At 2:25 a.m., Velma's body was taken to a medical school by an ambulance. She had requested that her organs be used for transplantation. She was buried in a small North Carolina cemetery near her first husband, Thomas Burke. She was 52 years old. Singer-songwriter Jonathan Byrd, the grandson of Jennings Barfield and his first wife, wrote a song about Velma. 22-year-old Brandon Gonsalves lived with his small family in Goregaon West. Now Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonsalves, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonsalves went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonsalves' mother Seema and older sister Kashma first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonsalves. Now, the sun had already set and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoshi police station to file a missing person report. Now, besides Gonsalves' family and friends, the police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindoshi police station had distributed Gonsalves' photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Ari police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, the police promptly rushed to the reported location in Ari Colony. Upon arrival, the scene they witness astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes, and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now, witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Ari police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonsalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonsalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindoshi police. So now the Ari police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonsalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonsalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonsalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonçalves's mother Sima and elder sister Kashma were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Sima saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonçalves's post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonçalves's tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing, with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonçalves so brutally that even the small spine is fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonçalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonçalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonçalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonçalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonçalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonçalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators, because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonçalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonçalves' body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder, if not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Gonçalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship and glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Gonçalves might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Ari colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonçalves leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonçalves left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now, what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then, a little further from Gonçalves' house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage, with 2 people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonçalves slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonçalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver, but the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than 2 people in the car, and unfortunately, the day Gonçalves' body was found, the 2 CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonçalves was abducted on December 19th in this same car and then murdered elsewhere, with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Ari Colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case, because the police checked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case, but none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Ari colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Goragaon. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Goragaon and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonçalves's killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonçalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonçalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonçalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonçalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonçalves rarely talked to anyone, except for his family, or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonçalves's room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Gonçalves's house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonçalves's dog, the startling thing was that Gonçalves's dog went straight to where Gonçalves's body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonçalves's body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest, like how Gonçalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonçalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Gonçalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Gonçalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, paducas, etc. Because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonçalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonçalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonçalves's mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son Brandon Gonçalves's murder case. During this time, Gonçalves's mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonçalves's murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter Kashma appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Gonçalves's case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli, when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Alekhya, 27, and Saidivya, 22, have both passed away, but there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kal Yuga is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend Dr. Naidu, "Everything is normal at home?" Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kalyug and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock, because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alakya. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale, and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room, where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Saidivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police were having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale, because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madinapal, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it. But seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now, the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now, as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead, so how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Naidu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now, the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something, but for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house, nor has anyone gone inside, not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid, who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Naidus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alakya highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alakya's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alakya's dead body, was a book by the spiritual guru Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Shri Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alekia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Nayudu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nadinapali. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madinapal for nearly 23 years, including at Masterminds IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Bhopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Saidivya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rahma Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alekia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alekia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmaja struck Alekia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alekia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudu's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter, and if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmaja scolded her husband Dr. Nayudu a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this, and it was revealed from a psychiatrist's source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alekia and Saidivya are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alekia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alekia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Nayudu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Saidivya and Dr. Purushottam Nayudu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Friends, how did you like this combined cases? Do you want to see such combined cases in the future too? Please share your opinion in the comment box. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now.